Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher, and it's now time for those Crusaders of Light. The Holy Paladins, the Prop Paladins, the Rep Paladins, those armor-clad, light-wielding, mace-wielding, shield-wearing heroes have had their changes, their foundation changes, announced for Legion. As always, I remind you, these are the bare-bones foundations of what the changes will be. We do not have the talent system, we don't have the artifact system in order to build onto the layers that actually end up with a final class. So please bear that in mind, and as always, these things are very quickly subject to change. But this is the idea that Blizzard is going with. So, without further ado, let us get into the holy. Like priests who serve the light, holy paladins are devout in their faith. After spending much of their lives in hallowed halls studying divine doctrine, those who pledge themselves to a holy order become beacons of the light for their allies in conflict, taking up heavy armor and weaponry of justice, holding the unwavering belief that any battle waged to eradicate evil in the world is righteous. These paladins stand on the front lines in service to all others, dedicated to the cause. The truth and virtue of the light imbues these sacred knights with the power to revitalize their comrades. If necessary, they even lay down their own lives to serve as martyr for the greater good. Now, that's a really nice blurb because it basically sums up all the ideas they're doing to change the Holy Paladin, which was, in my own words, simply a turret of healing spells that didn't do much of anything but just spam and let the beacons do the work. And that was it. They became so boring, at least from my perspective in Warlords of Draenor, that they're now trying to put in a lot of thought into how you play your Holy Paladin. Now, how have they achieved that, you might wonder? They've achieved that essentially by adding in something called proximity. Or, well, they're actually calling it, what is it? Lightbringer, okay? They're calling it Lightbringer, which is your new mastery. Proximity to the target increases healing by up to 30%. That's a lot. That's a hell of a lot. Now, there's also a crucial piece of information missing from these class notes, and that is there are going to be talented auras based on proximity. So not only do you increase your healing, but you are going to be able to pick up various auras that work in probably a very short range, and you're going to have to pick and choose which ones you want to take. Harking back to the old days of the Paladin with the classic Devotion Aura and the Resistance Auras, perhaps. Will they be activatable, short-term buffs? We don't know. Will they be constant? We don't know. We can't see them yet. But this is important to understand that it's not just a straight-up healing buff. Why is that important, Preacher? Well, because if you've ever raided anything, you will know that proximity is usually way out of a healer's control. If we can gather as many people as possible into one location, we will do that regardless of anybody's mastery. Why? It's way easier to heal people. Way easier to heal people who are stood inside a healing rain and all getting spammed by all the AoE at the same time. If we can't gather people, that's because the raid encounter dictates that we cannot do that. So it's out of our hands. This proximity thing based on how much healing you do is a little bit up in the air as to how useful this is in terms of decision making, because there are many cases where that decision is simply taken out of our hands. We have to spread. It doesn't matter what your fucking mastery does. We have to spread. So shut up and put up with it. So it's kind of interesting to see that hopefully the talented auras will actually play a bigger part than just the raw healing output. A lot of people are suspecting maybe we'll put a Holy Paladin near the tanks. Probably not. I mean, in a lot of occasions, we don't want people stood near the tanks because they're usually getting cleaved or sharing damage or splitting things and it causes problems if you do that. You might get debuffed with something that we absolutely don't want to happen near the tanks, right? Because you're a healer. That's how the game works. It goes, oh, who's a healer? You. You can go. You can't stand there. Simple as that, because this is a ranged ability, blah, 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 blah. Maybe they'll go under the way Mistweavers work, where they consider them melee or whatever. It's all up in the air, but there are many occasions where you just cannot do that for a variety of reasons. Same with standing in the melee. The reason we don't often have a healer stood in the melee, unless it's like a Mistweaver, is because the melee have to deal with things where they have to move around a hell of a lot, which means Paladins don't get to heal as much, and it doesn't really work out. So we'll have to see how that plays out, honestly. Most of the time, I don't see it being a huge deal. If we can benefit from it, great. If not, then we can't. New spells then. So some spells have been removed, like Word of Glory. Holy Power is gone. Okay, something you should bear in mind. I don't think anybody will weep over the loss of holy power. It was a very boring and rigid mechanic. You were just working up to eternal flames all the time. Boring fucking snoring. Light of Dawn does remain, though, okay? While Word of Glory is gone, Light of Dawn does remain. But they're changing it now to back to its Cataclysm roots. For any of you who played Holy Paladin back then, it's now a frontal cone again. Which kind of, in some way, not a great deal, but works against the proximity idea. Because anybody who played in Cataclysm and a Holy Paladin, what you actually wanted was as many people as possible in a ball, and then you would move out of that group in order to shove your whole Light of Dawn through all of them, as many as possible. It can be achieved in several different ways, but the last thing you wanted was to be stood in front of somebody, because your Light of Dawn wouldn't hit them, and you're too busy dealing with other things to really notice that, and you miss out on healing somebody who potentially is about to die with your Light of Dawn, so that's something to bear in mind as well. You do gain a new spell called Light of the Martyr. An instant cast spell, reasonably expensive, more expensive than a Holy Light for sure, but it is instant, and it sacrifices some of your health to instantly heal an ally for a reasonable amount. So it's like an instant cast Holy Light, but it's actually going to hurt you by doing it. Interesting idea. I mean, I wouldn't look at this as more of an emo, goth, self-harming type thing. I would look at it more as their martyrdom that they're aiming for and the theme of the Paladin. I think there's a potential here that they could have just used Blessing of Hand of Sacrifice in a better way. So you had a choice to make between Hand of Sacrifice on potentially a tank usually, which is a big powerful cooldown, or you could actually sacrifice yourself and give yourself a rather nasty debuff, but it gave you benefits in other ways, like Holy Shock hitting multiple people, Light of Dawn now hits more people. Something along those lines might have been a better idea, but Light of the Martyr exists, that's the spell that you're going to be going with, and that is how it is. The talent they've given us is the Beacon of the Lightbringer, which again is really interesting because now, obviously without this talent, your proximity stuff is based on your character and where you are stood in the encounter. If you use Beacon of the Lightbringer, however, it increases your mastery, so you heal more based on proximity, and Beacon now acts as if it was you, so the proximity effects come from your Beacon as well. That's very, very cool, because that means the tanks do get the benefit. It's probably a direct counter to the things I've discussed earlier on in here, why you can't have, really, putting healers and stuff in next to the tanks and the melee in all occasions. Now you can actually do that from the Beacon. So it actually makes Beacon more interesting. Is it more reasonable, in fact, to put Beacon, because of the power of the auras and the healing, on a melee DPS? So that you have this in the clump of melee who are dealing with difficult things. Can we put a Beacon in there? Because now that's going to work based on proximity. It's going to increase all your healing on the melee, and it's going to give them the power of your auras, whatever they might be. So there is some extra depth and choice here coming for the Holy Paladin, which is fantastic. They became so boring. I'm really happy to see this coming out. Overall, really happy with the Holy Paladin. Sorry, if the audio cuts out, it's because I'm coughing. I'm still really unwell. My bad. So, what's the gameplay changes? Well, basically, you're doing similar things to what you're doing right now. However, you're going to have all these extra layers of things to think about. Position, 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 position. Obviously, you're going to be trying to take advantage of proximity wherever possible, as you'll get just straight up benefits from doing that in terms of HPS. And also, making best use of your auras. So, it's all about positioning and trying to find the place which is best for you to stand. And being the man who stands up and says, I need to stand here. Move, Resto Druid, depending on what they get, obviously. But move me. I need to stand here because I'll get way more benefits from that. So, pretty cool so far for the Holy Paladin. Look forward to trying it out. I hope the proximity stuff doesn't fall flat on its face, and the Beacon of the Lightbringer becomes mandatory in order to counter that. Let's move on to protection. The Paladin's tools of war lay bare their motivations. Clenched in one hand is the weapon, a deadly device for exacting righteous judgment. Locked in the other hand is the shield, a symbolic and literal barrier, protecting good from evil. Stalwart and steadfast, these protectors are ardent defenders of the light and all that it touches, and are rejuvenated by its radiance in return. So dedicated they are to their cause that they consecrate the very ground upon which they battle corruption. So protection is getting away from the kind of mindless style of play that it is picked up towards the end of Warlords of Draenor. It has been a big focus of a lot of protection paladins to simply get Shield of the Righteous up nearly 100%, if at all possible, by spamming endless Avenger shields, generating ludicrous amounts of holy power, and just spam Shield of the Righteous without enough thought going into it. How are they changing it then? Holy power is gone, so they're changing Shield of the Righteous to now an ability that has charges. So you get 3 charges standard with a 12-second recharge. Now, this is great. This is absolutely great. It now reduces all damage, apparently, according to the tooltip, by 25%, not just physical. But as somebody who plays a class that already deals with this, I've made a prot warrior, I have the charge system already, it is so much more interesting. So much more interesting. It really is, because you have to consider where you will spend these. You have to consider that. You can't just go for uptime. You have to think about it, and leaving yourself without enough charges to cover certain things is a really bad idea. This is your main source of active mitigation, and if you're trying to just keep it up all the time, it's so not active mitigation by any means, and it's about time that they looked at this. It's something I've mentioned in pretty much every Prot Paladin video over Warlords of Draenor, is that you really should start thinking about Shield of the Righteous in a better way. Now, the other active mitigation they give you is Light of the Protector, and this is really interesting, actually. It's a 15-second cooldown, but it heals you for 50% of your missing health. This is great. This is great. After just finishing Dark Souls, I can tell you this is very much like an Estus Flask. You have to decide when to use this, because 15 seconds is a long time, baby. That is a long time when you're tanking to be without something that could save your ass, right? It's a really long time. You have to decide. Do I use it now? And maybe I'm going to be okay? Or do I wait? What are my healers doing? Where are my next sources of healing going to come from? Will I get more benefit from this if I delay it? Or will I get no use from it? And I could get use from it now. You have to make these decisions on the fly. This is wonderful. Really good. So much better than Word of Glory and Bastion and all that kind of stuff. This is way more interesting because, one, if you use it incorrectly, you're going to get very little benefit out of it and be punished accordingly. If you use it correctly, you're going to get supreme use out of it. Really good, solid amounts of healing on yourself and save your healers a lot of stress because it's instant cast. You'll pop the button, you'll get the healing. So I love this. I absolutely love this. We also had some points towards where your stats will go, so you'll get a Redoubt as a passive, where your crit strike chance on your auto attacks gain a charge of Shield of the Righteous or Light of the Protector, right? So it says or. I don't know how that's going to work. So will you maybe just get sometimes your Light of the Protector resetting, or will you get Shield of the Righteous, and it could be a choice either way where that goes. We don't know yet, but it certainly means that you'll be probably pushing towards crit. And what I hope is that this doesn't ultimately end up with Shield of the Righteous being almost spammable again because your crit chance is so high. That would be really fucking boring, I think so. I don't want that. I don't want it to go down that road. I like the idea that tanks are making choices, okay? I think that's very, very cool. In terms of offensive stuff, they finally done away with having both Crusader Strike and Hammer of the Righteous. How that has lasted like 3 expansions is beyond me, because it's so fucking stupid. So what you'll have now is Hammer of the Righteous on its own. It will be a melee range instant single target attack unless you're stunning Consecration, in which case it'll do the AoE that you guys are all used to. So obviously when you're AoEing, you'll have Consecrate down at all times, so you'll do AoE with Hammer of the Righteous. If you don't have Consecrate going, then you will just do the single target attack. One question though is that Consecration still does a lot of damage according to its tooltip. Will we just have Consecration down when single targeting? We do now. So how's that going to work? Is it going to be a case that you will be playing badly by trying to put Consecration into your single target play? Have to wait on the math on that. Is the Consecration worth more than what it will do to Hammer of the Righteous? Or if it's not, my point on this is, if it really makes no difference, then why not just have a Hammer of the Righteous just do AoE? What's the point in adding this Consecration tooltip if we're going to be doing it anyway? That's what I like to see. Avenger's Shield remains, and Grand Crusader does. I can't see Holy Wrath, actually. I think Holy Wrath is maybe gone. However, as always, I remind you that we're not getting a full list of every spell we're going to get, so it could exist somewhere. It's just not listed here, okay? It's just not listed here, because we still have Judgment, but Holy Wrath seems to have gone by the way, which was an occasional very cool little CC, especially as we move into more difficult dungeons, as we've seen with Legion. The talent they've showed is Blessed Hammer. Instant 3-second recharge with 2 charges. It replaces Hammer of the Righteous. And you throw a Divine Hammer that spirals outward from the Paladin, dealing moderate holy damage to enemies it passes through. I'm not really sure what's going on with this. It sounds like it's a more ticking AoE attack, is what I would say. So if you've got constantly spawning adds, it's a little bit more helpful than Hammer of the Righteous, I guess. I mean, I'm not really sure what's going on with this. Perhaps somebody has a better interpretation than me. But if we already have Consecrate ticking, why we would need the sort of more dot-based Hammer of the Righteous is a little bit odd to me. I'm not really picking up on the vibe there that they're aiming for with that talent. I might be missing something really obvious, but from what I can see, it's instead of like Hammer of the Righteous, which just goes bang and it's done everything, that the hammer spins around in a circle and just hits stuff as it circles around. Maybe it does more damage. Maybe that's it. It just does more damage. I don't know. It says moderate holy damage, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that at all. Let's move on to Retribution then. To serve as instrument of the light is to hold an unshakable faith. Oftentimes the most dedicated paladins become fanatical in their devotion, instruments of retribution against those who dare defy the laws of divine. These paladins are vengeful guardians of the weak, crusaders judging and punishing the wicked. Their resolute conviction in the divine order of all things assures them that victory is inevitable, but they will fight till the end to ensure that the light prevails. Whole lot of nothing in that blurb. Whole lot of nothing. So where's the Ret Paladin going? They seem to be trying to get away from some of the RNG that's involved with the Retribution Paladin, but they're moving it towards a more methodical approach. Okay, so although they've listed a whole bunch of spells on their preview, I've actually altered the order here because I think it makes way more sense if we look at it from this perspective. And this is how it's going to go. Judgment now is a 12-second cooldown. Still does damage, but it now applies a debuff that increases the damage done by holy power spenders and generators by 30% for 6 seconds. So a 12-second cooldown, 6-second debuff. Ah. So what does this mean? It means it's Colossus Smash now. Okay? This, if you've ever played a warrior, it's Colossus Smash. Every 12 seconds you will get this window of opportunity to put your most powerful attacks into the enemy, and then you'll be kind of building up for the next Judgment window, or Colossus Smash window, whatever you want to refer it to. It is basically that. That is all it is. They've decided to move that into the Ret Paladin arsenal. What do you think about that? Just let me know down below. I personally hate the Colossus Smash stuff because everything outside of it just feels boring, and then you kind of like go on your keyboard, and then you have to wait, and it's up and down all the time. So in going with this vibe, Templar's Verdict still exists, as does Divine Storm as your finishers. You now gain another ability called Blade of Justice with a 12-second cooldown. Matches Judgment. It does a lot of damage and generates 2 holy power, so it's far more effective than a Crusader Strike, which still exists, which you'll be using in between to generate holy power. So the general idea here is you'll judge, get the debuff on for 6 seconds. You'll then use Blade of Justice and Templar's Verdict and all your big heavy hitters in that 6-second window and use Crusader Strike and so on in order to build back up to the next Judgment. Right? That is basically how it's going to go. Alongside this, they've given you a passive conviction, which is Crusader Strike and Blade of Justice have a 20% chance to generate 1 holy power on top of what they already do. So you have this mixed in. It feels a little bit more sterile than probably what most Rets are used to, but I think maybe people are open to that idea at this point. Entirely likely, some people are more than happy to have a more steady and predictable outcome of DPS. But are you happy with going down the Colossus Smash route, or would you have preferred to see something else? Maybe something changing to Censure or whatever. The talent they're showing off here is Lothar's Might. So this is the big deal that's going on right now with people who've already read this information. What is Lothar's Might? It's a 30-yard range, it's instant, it's 30-second cooldown, it flings a blade of holy light to the target location. Fling wee! Reactivating the button will teleport the paladin to the blade and strike enemies for moderate holy damage. You heard me right. They're getting teleport. Now this replaces something called Hand of Hindrance. We don't really know what that is, but that doesn't matter. Right. Paladins are getting teleport. Now, I've already consulted, because I did a minor Twitter blast about this information, because I know I've upset the lore guys recently. I apologise, I don't intend to. And Nobler came back to me that it makes no sense. We're okay with that. Lothar's a warrior, for a start. Okay. We decided ultimately that it might be Johnny Lothar, a religious zealot brother who the family pretends doesn't exist. Potentially, I don't know. It makes no fucking sense. It's ripped from Tyrael, apparently in Hearts of the Heroes of the Storm. And yeah, it's one of those things. I agree. Don't get me wrong here. I agree. Ret Paladins could do with a decent gap closer. A teleport is always cool because you can predict where to throw it and where things are going to happen, and you can get there. Did it need to be a teleport though? No. It could have been so many other things that would kind of made way more sense. It would probably been way cooler. Would you have been adverse if the same thing happened, but you basically shot out your Avenging Wrath wings, not that you used that cooldown, shot up into the air, similar to Heroic Leap, and came down crashing, and maybe even dropped a Consecrate on top of it? Like, that would have been much cooler, I think. Why not just summon a mount of light, like a horse of light, that temporarily, for the next 2 seconds, super speeds you to a various location, like Blink, but ever so slightly slower? Would that have been a problem? Damaging everything in its path? I think not. And I think people have been more happy with this. People are really happy to be getting this. But I think they're more happy they're getting a gap closer rather than the fact that it's a teleport, which makes no sense in the Warcraft universe. From everything I know and the people I've spoken to, it makes no goddamn sense that this exists. But there it is. That's what you're getting. So I'm going to leave that basically down to you guys to discuss, because it is what it is. And there you go. The Paladin changes. Bye-bye, guys. I'll see you again.